is Diane Koppen. She grew up in Spirit Lake, Iowa. She attended the University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls, gaining a bachelor's degree in education along with a coaching endorsement. Diana taught middle school in Harlan, Denison, and Everly before becoming a fourth grade teacher of 30 years in Spencer. Being inspired by the young writers in her own classroom, Diana co-authored 2 books with her sister Pam. Becoming authors certainly changed Pam and Diana's lives, as about 60 programs have been given since 2021. With the success of their first book, they were instrumental in getting a 6-month museum exhibit of their aunt's work on display at the Heritage Center in Spencer, which led to their aunt receiving other accolades that Diana will share with you during her program. Please help me welcome Diana.
I appreciate all of you being in here tonight. This is a Human Library presentation. Human Library is a place to go, sit, talk, and walk in the steps of others. I'm hopeful the theme I am going to share encourages each of you to record your family narratives for future generations, as well as continue to bring those human library experiences to your classrooms. This is my Aunt Marion with her Freedom School students in Alabama. My mother Gladys with me in her arms. Gladys is Marion's sister. And my dad George giving me words of wisdom on my wedding day. Back in January of 2022, I made a trip to Waldorf University to walk the campus that my mother Gladys Helen Ducey walked as she followed in her sister Marion Helen's footsteps to attend Waldorf and to become an educator. This special day was documented in the Waldorf Alumni Magazine. Both these educators took different strolls that impacted many lives, and they both are the reason I too chose to become an elementary school teacher. On that day, I began the journey of donating our first book about Aunt Marion to libraries and schools. We encourage and promote the reading of books from your library. However, we do have a few books by the registration for sale as the proceeds go to donating books to libraries and schools. Through this presentation today, you will not only witness how a white woman from Cylinder, Iowa, and eventually Spencer could be so important in revealing first-hand accounts of civil rights history, and how a couple's love and devotion served as a model for relationships on how to treat others, but you will also understand the importance of taking time to actively listen to others. To bring meaning to the importance of human libraries in our lives, the 2 books my sister Pam and I co-authored came from just such human library experiences. Due to time, I will only be able to highlight some of the many stories that are found in our 2 books. It was our mother Gladys who encouraged us to write about her older sister Marion. So I will begin with how our first book originated. In 2017, at the age of 90, our Aunt Marion Helen and her husband David Crawford moved from the Minneapolis area to Spencer to return to Marion's Iowa roots. They chose Spencer because of the central location between Marion's brother in Cylinder and our mother in Spirit Lake. Prior to their move to Iowa in 2017, their Minnesota house sold quickly. They had 1 weekend to pack and move. They only had 3 small vehicles to hold their belongings, so many items were left behind. However, they made room for over 50 boxes filled with historical mementos Marion saved throughout her life. When Aunt Marion arrived in Spencer, she gave all these boxes to us because she knew that as teachers, we would use her materials with our students. Even at the age of 90, she wrote these suggested lessons you see pictured here for each of those boxes. When Marion passed away in 2018, our family turned to us to write her obituary. What a special yet challenging task. We were tasked with sharing all that little dash separating the date of her birth and the date of her death encompassed. This was definitely our most important writing task to date, as our aunt's 91 years of life impacted so many. When we posted Marion's obituary on the funeral home's website, within hours, we received this following comment. This beautifully written obituary reflects the light of a life so well lived. I did not know Marion, more's the pity. Even her obituary was forwarded to me this evening by a friend. It, like Marion, has gained a life of its own. What a life, what a woman, what a human being. Well, this quote echoes the sadness felt due to a missed human library experience with Marion. Because of the outpouring of responses from this obituary on Marion, we knew that these primary sources contained in these 50 boxes covering over a century of civil rights service needed to be shared with the world. We wrote and published Marion's memoir, a unique viewpoint into the civil rights movement from a Midwestern, white school teacher's perspective spanning over 90 years. Now, we will tap into the human library of Marion Helland. To help you understand the reasons Marion felt this struggle was simply something she must do, her upbringing in Iowa deeply molded her views. And this is one of the wall clings that was at the museum exhibit in Spencer. In the 1920s, our grandparents, along with one set of great-grandparents, traveled by ship from Norway to the United States in search of a great place to farm and raise a family. Marion was born a year later in Minnesota, but soon the family moved to Iowa, surrounded by Norwegian traditions. At a very early age, Marion experienced what it was like to be different. She spoke no English when she entered her first one-room school near Wallingford, Iowa. Marion knew her priority was to learn English and quickly saw that learning to read was the key to that success. Marion had many unusual responsibilities for a 6-year-old. She wrote all the family checks. She served as translator for all the business trips. Ironically, when in her 90s, Marion fell ill, and to regain her strength, she spent 2 months in a care facility. Marion worked tirelessly during physical therapy sessions. However, while in that care center, the unyielding rules of conformity mandated by the state warred with Marion's needs for differentiation. And note her hairstyle here. Even though she jokingly noted that the women all sported the same hairdos, the cries for individuality were deafening. When asked to write a pretend check to prove that she could do it, Marion affirmed that she had been writing family checks since she was 6 years old. It was then that Marion asked to be on the care facility board to advocate for the residents, suggesting that human library sessions between the staff and residents would be very beneficial to all. As a young girl, Marion's world was impacted by her personal experiences as a child of immigrant parents, as well as the words she read on paper. In the 1930s, Marion's world was rocked when her teacher shared Uncle Tom's Cabin. This is a book about the inhumane treatment of slaves in the 1850s. So Marion started to research how black people in the U.S. were currently being treated. And and she shared her concerns with her family. Well, Marion's father wanted all Americans to witness the same freedoms that brought Marion's mother and him to the United States from Norway. Doesn't some of this sound timely? He pointed out to Marion the deep-rooted, unjust treatment endured by some people in the South, and he warned all of his children, do not believe everything you read in those history books. Search for the full story through primary source experiences. So from that day on, Marion critically examined her books, as well as every word she heard, by backing up those words with facts garnered through human library experiences. At her young age, Marion actually believed that once others got wind of the injustices, the problems would be rectified. However, in 1940, Marion read about the terrible treatment of Jewish people in her family's Norwegian newspapers, only solidifying the ongoing problems around the world. Therefore, in her Cylinder High School valedictorian speech in 1944, oh, how I wish I could have been there, Marion used this symbolism of a twisted twig to exemplify the warped ideas of Hitler, as well as others that kept people from realizing their dreams. Listen to part of her speech, 17 years old. As a twisted twig sometimes develops into the bent tree, spoiling the symmetry of the forest, so sometimes a twisted idea finds root in the mind of man and develops a personality which spoils the beauty of man's dreams. Following her Waldorf College graduation in 1946, Marion began her teaching career in Bode and then Davenport before moving to the Minneapolis area to teach. Marion encouraged her students to celebrate individual differences, equipping them with tools to dismantle hatred and ignorance. Beyond meeting her Minnesota students' needs, Marion began to study the events of the civil rights movement and contemplating ways that she could help. In 1964, President Johnson approved the Civil Rights Act to declare segregation and discrimination illegal. While reading her teacher's newsletter, oh, what we can find in those newsletters, right? Marion spotted an advertisement titled, "Teachers Wanted to Teach Freedom." She stumbled upon the chance to teach youth how to correct the errors of the past. Marion's first assignment was to set up a freedom school in Gadsden, Alabama, as well as helping with voter registration. During the summer of 1965, as Marion approached Alabama for the first time, she noted this in her journals, and she journaled everything. I'll quote, "When I arrived, the countryside looks calm enough, and those of us who had never been to Alabama were pleasantly surprised by the beautiful scenery. Alabamans are especially proud of their NASA Space Center in Huntsville, where they work on the Saturn rockets." Now, I remind you, this is 1965, 4 years before the moon landing. Marion goes on to write this. "So it seems that they are able to contribute to putting men in space and perhaps on the moon, but have to be brought kicking and screaming to the basic idea of allowing a man into a voting booth or a perfectly qualified student into the University of Alabama if that man or that student happens to be a black citizen rather than a white one." And later in that same journal, she wrote this. "Any thought of enjoying the scenery and Southern hospitality is suddenly jarred by signs posted indicating what the human climate is like. Signs such as, 'We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone,' 'Whites only,' 'Colored entrance.' To fully understand the magnitude of the problems facing the desegregation efforts, on her first day in Alabama, Marion and the other freedoms teachers sneaked into a Klan meeting held at the local elementary school. Marion recalled being shocked by the discovery that, and I will quote, "They had records of Christian hymns playing as we marched in, and there were also young children in Klan outfits." Our first memoir describes in more detail about Marion's time in Gadsden, Alabama. The following summer, in June of 1966, in support of the black voting efforts of the previous summer, activist James Meredith scheduled a 220-mile walk from Memphis to Jackson, Mississippi, to demonstrate if such a feat could be accomplished by a black man. Unfortunately, Meredith barely crossed the Tennessee state line before he was shot. However, through the encouragement of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the march continued, with Meredith joining the others after he was released from the hospital. Well, when school concluded for the summer, Marion headed from Minnesota to Mississippi to join in that march, whereupon Marion helped nearly 4,000 black people with voter registration. After the march, Marion opened another freedom school in Columbia, Mississippi, where visits by the Klan included numerous slashed tires, as well as an attempted cross burning on her front lawn. However, these actions did not deter Marion from her mission of registering adults to vote, teaching the youth, and desegregating areas then deemed open to all, regardless of color. After each summer of service, Marion returned to the Midwest, questioning how people could ignore what was going on in the South. She continued to work with the civil rights movement alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and kept all her letters from Dr. King, suggesting peaceful ways to instill change. Unfortunately, Marion also experienced April of 1968, when MLK traveled to Memphis to peacefully advocate for better conditions for sanitation workers and was shot and killed. Prior to his death, MLK initiated the Poor People's Campaign. This was a peaceful way to bring awareness to the poor living conditions of so many people. Even though MLK was gone, the Poor People's March continued that year. Marion took a 17-hour bus trip from Minnesota to Washington, D.C. to take part in the daily demonstrations. Marion stayed in these boarded tents for nearly 2 months that summer. Marion's fight for human rights continued to expand beyond her classroom as she participated in and implemented numerous programs throughout the Midwest as well as across the nation. She served as mentors to so many. After retirement, I'll say that loosely, Marion not only spoke out for Indigenous rights within AIM, but also mentored middle schoolers, teaching them the essay writing process, recognizing that many living narratives needed to be heard from the Indigenous community, and wanting to equip the youth with the ability to put their ideas down on paper. In 2002, Marion noted that the country is polluted by racist talk. 2002. Yeah. With Minnesota alone averaging over 200 hate crimes a year. Therefore, Marion organized rehab to rehabilitate convicted offenders of hate incidents. Through the program, probation officers contacted Marion, and she in turn met with those individuals, ranging from elementary school age to age 40. Despite being a 100-pound woman in her late 70s, Marion's demeanor and her own life experiences made that program a success. Her non-judgmental approach allowed offenders the freedom to talk openly, share their hatred, but it gave her access to the part of their minds open to change. Well, the 21st century was a time of receiving numerous awards. A group of high school students, along with the DC Everett Project, published this book in 2013. Not only does this book begin with a chapter about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but it includes a chapter about Marion Helland as one of the influential people from the modern civil rights movement. One of the quotations included in this book from Marion at the age of 86 sums up her passion for this mission. I am proud to have been a part of the civil rights movement and would certainly have been ashamed if I had skipped that historic opportunity. Another honor bestowed upon Marion came from her alma mater, Waldorf University. I would like to read an excerpt from our first book about this ceremony in Forest City. In 2015, Marion, at the age of 88, and her family ventured to Forest City, Iowa, where Marion's alma mater named her the recipient of the Waldorf College Alumni Distinguished Service Award for her relentless contributions to human rights. Being awarded the Waldorf Award was extra special to Marion because David, as well as her sister Gladys and her brother Orville, and their spouses and children were in attendance. Marion expressed how this acceptance speech marked the first time that she was very nervous about giving a speech, wanting it to be perfect for her siblings, coupled with the fact that it was her alma mater. Well, my husband and I were in attendance at this awards ceremony. As part of Marion's introduction, the gentleman attempted to list Marion's decades of accomplishments, and that list was spectacular. After being introduced with the commentary of all of Marion's accomplishments, Marion utilized that somber face she was dubbed with possessing even in high school and started her speech with, "I'm kind of tired after listening to all that introduction." Now that's our Marion. In October of 2023, my other sister Kathy, and I, along with our spouses, received in Marion's honor the Woman of Achievement Award that honors historic Iowa women. Marion is only one of 23 honored with a plaque on the Iowa Women of Achievement Bridge in downtown Des Moines. We highly recommend visiting this bridge to read about these amazing women while you were here in Des Moines this weekend. And it is on our map that we were given, so it's right in there telling where that's at to help you locate it. And our most recent exciting news was the request of Marion's 50 boxes to be added to the University of Iowa Women's Archives for research purposes. 2 representatives from the university came to our house last November to bring these boxes to the University of Iowa. Once it is all digitized, any university or research group will have access to Marion's collection. After publishing our aunt's memoir, we knew another captivating story about our mother, our Aunt Marion Helland's younger sister Gladys. Pam's daughter, Jaden Gracie, not only designed the cover for Marion's memoir, but in our latest memoir, had previously created the painting on this front cover as an anniversary gift for her grandparents, George and Gladys Ducey. This is set at Memorial Park in Spirit Lake, and her grandparents, my mom and dad, are seated on the bench down by the lake. The back cover most fittingly contains a photo of Dad's Bronco overlooking Big Spirit, taken by another granddaughter, Macy Harms. Many Spirit Lake residents remember Dad driving around the lakes region in this Bronco. Another sister of mine, Deb, who lives in Spirit Lake, and her husband have continued this tradition as they now have Dad's Bronco. Our second memoir encompasses a love story unveiled through a sampling of narratives during our human library sessions with our parents, throughout our lives, and especially during our parents' final years. In the Bible, the number 7 symbolizes completion or perfection. George Bernard Ducey Jr. graced this earth in May of 1931, born in Sway City, Iowa, the 5th son of George Sr. and Cecilia Lindway Ducey, making their family a perfect 7. When the Duceys entered their farmhouse with their new bundle of joy, baby George's 4 big brothers instantly gave him the moniker Junior. Junior and his brothers helped their father operate the family farm, while Cecilia kept the household and her 5 sons in order. I cannot even imagine. The boys attended school during the winters, but each year spent much of spring, summer, and fall working the fields. Junior enjoyed school and left no person a stranger, loving to socialize with others. Junior's family always came first in his eyes. Consequently, during his high school years, he juggled working on the family farm, completing his classwork, and competing in sports. And here's just a few of the teams that he was a part of. After graduating from high school, Junior ensured that his parents were financially secure before moving to Titonka, Iowa, to run a gas station. Junior enjoyed working on cars. Before moving to Titonka, Junior wanted his parents to have a reliable vehicle, so that same year, he helped his father buy his first and only brand new car, a 1955 Chevy. In Titonka, George dropped the moniker Junior and started forming his identity as George. 4.5 years after George's birth, and just a few miles down the road, Gladys Kathleen Helen was born in Esterville, Iowa, on December 19th of 1935 to Olaf and Margaret Kumla Helen. As once that the grandparents lived with them, the birth of Gladys completed their extended Helen family's perfect 7. Hard work, dedication, sacrifices, family love, and Norwegian culture became ingrained within Gladys. After graduating in 1954, Gladys pursued her dream to become a teacher, and she attended Waldorf College, following in her sister Marion's footsteps. Shortly after crossing the graduation stage in 1956, Gladys, accompanied by Marion, who had been teaching for 10 years, went on her first interview for an elementary teaching position in Titonka, Iowa. Gladys later shared that, counter to typical interviews today, Marion went into the interview with her and did most of the talking. This does not surprise us, and now that you know a bit about Marion, it probably doesn't surprise you either. Gladys was hired on the spot and accepted her first teaching position in Titonka, just a short year after George's move there. Well, apartments were non-existent in Titonka, so Gladys rented a small room in a house. After Gladys's parents dropped her off with all her earthly belongings, loneliness took over as she looked around the small space she now called home. Since she did not have a car, she spent her first days in her room, eagerly awaiting the start of the school year. She yearned to converse with her students and start making connections in the community, and soon she did just that. Halfway through her second week in Titonka, the school secretary, we know how those secretaries are so helpful. She asked Gladys to go out for a soda at the local cafe because she wanted Gladys to meet George, who ran the town's gas station. George would typically, after supper, head uptown to the pool hall to play cards with the locals, which was the main form of entertainment for the residents of Titonka at that time. However, per Gladys's upbringing, a pool hall would not be an appropriate place for her to meet friends. So George went to the cafe that evening instead. After that first meeting, George silently vowed to live his life right, so he would be worthy of Gladys's hand. I can't tell you how many times we've heard that story. A lot of pressure on the husband. On Gladys's birthday on December 19th of 1958, George proposed. In August of 1959, George and Gladys married. As a symbol of their commitment, they recited their vows and used these words were used to as a steadfast framework for their lives together. The couple eventually moved to Spirit Lake and formed their perfect family of 7. When Janine, the youngest in this picture, turned 4, Gladys accepted a full-time teaching position in Spirit Lake. However, a full-time position was taking more of Gladys's time from her family than she could spare. So Gladys became a substitute teacher instead. Many teachers requested Gladys and referred to her as the #1 substitute teacher. At least that's what Dad tells us. Because she kept the classrooms running smoothly, as if the full-time teacher was still there. Gladys would go on to substitute teach for 5 decades, inspiring 4 of her 5 daughters to pursue careers in education as well. Beyond owning and running Ducey's Mobile and Country Store in Spirit Lake, Dad took on another financial responsibility: snow pushing. And there's that Bronco. Okay? This time became family time, as we took turns riding along on his many jobs. We vividly remember the numerous conversations we had in the front cab of that Bronco, as Dad cleared, St. Mary's Catholic Church in particular, after each snow. All the while, directly across the street from that church, Dad privately eyed an old but spacious house positioned on a huge lot. With the expensive entertainment for a household of 7, a car ride around Spirit Lake often served as a family fun adventure. We would pile in the car, hit the road, and explore. Well, on these trips, Dad would stop in front of older, run-down houses, jokingly saying that he had purchased the house. And then Dad and Mom would laugh. "Oh, George," Mom would say. Well, one afternoon, our car ride took us past St. Mary's Catholic Church, and Dad stopped in front of 911 Gary Avenue. Per usual, Dad announced he was purchasing this house to fix up. And at first, Mom laughed and said, "Oh, George." But we girls in the back seat could tell that Dad was not joking this time. He had visions of returning that old house to its glory of so many years past and utilizing the spacious yard for outdoor time with his girls. Nevertheless, Mom just saw this house as a ramshackle mess. Tears fell from her eyes, which tugged at Dad's heart. He promised her he would just fix it up, and if she didn't like it, they would sell it. Well, reluctantly, Mom agreed to this plan, and Dad then began remodeling this house during his spare moments. Well, a few months of dedication and vision later, Dad had transformed the old, dilapidated shell of a building into a house fit for his queen and their princesses. With Mom's approval, we packed all our possessions and moved across town. Mom quickly converted the house Dad had remodeled into a home for our family, a treasure Mom would fight hard to call home for the rest of her life. We each married and had children of our own. Beyond family visits, Mom and Dad treasured their time together. Even stepping back in time in George Sr.'s 1955 Chevy. You might recall that before Dad moved to Titanca, he helped his father buy this 1955 Chevy. It is still in our family, as my sister Pam, who wrote the books with me, and her husband have this car in Memphis to enjoy. Oh, and there is such a cute story in our book about how that 55 Chevy traveled from Spirit Lake to Memphis to be with Pam and her husband. Well, when people least expect it, life can throw them off course, breaking the comfortable routine. For years, our parents actively listened to our every need, but the perspectives of our human library sessions transitioned to our parents' needs. That large house at 911 Gary, it seemed to us to be a lot for them to maintain. So we formed visions of our parents in a nice small house versus our big family home. But we quickly learned that was not Mom's vision. 2018 hit hard. First, Mom was plagued with illness, and you can see Jaden's painting behind them, given to them on their 60th anniversary. And then Dad, and then Mom, stripping them of time together as they rehabilitated at the local care center. After Mom's last illness, Dad fell and fractured his hip. So he joined her at the care center while his hip healed. Dad recovered faster than expected. And on the day that doctor granted permission for Dad to put weight on his hip again, Dad, determined to help Mom more, got up, walked with a walker as if he had never missed a step. He transitioned his therapy to assisting Mom by pushing her, using her wheelchair handles as his crutch, down the hall to each meal, and helping her with many tasks around the room. We continued to search for ways to bridge the gaps in our parents' uprooted lives. Unfortunately for Pam, she was over 850 miles away, making infrequent in-person visits impossible. Therefore, knowing the health benefits of laughter, Pam would mail daily letters filled with the funny memes and cartoons. Paige's mom requested to be put in 3-ring binders for all the visitors to enjoy. Besides letters, we would make daily phone calls where Dad began each conversation with the same opening, depending on which daughter was calling. Gladys, your first, second, third, fourth, fifth daughter's on the phone. And after a few words, he handed the phone to Mom, who was always waiting anxiously to hear our voices. Mom experienced months of medical ups and downs, and at times, Mom would refer to me as her sister Marion, which would later make sense to us. In February of 2020, at the Care Center's Valentine's Supper, my sister Deb was able to join Mom and Dad. When Deb finally found Mom and Dad's assigned table, oh, did Mom welcome Deb to join their family table and have supper with them. But then asked Deb, now which family is yours, honey? Well, during that Valentine's supper, Mom read the place settings, name tags displaying George Ducey and Gladys Ducey, and she turned to Dad, asking him when they had gotten married. While processing Dad's first answer to this question, Mom leaned over to ask Deb if Mom's parents were okay with them marrying. When Deb reassured Mom that her parents loved Dad very much, Mom smiled endearingly at Deb's response. So that Valentine weekend allowed George and Gladys time to bring back all the memories and erase Gladys's months of confusion. Dad passionately walked Mom through their love story, 64 plus years of narratives, as the Gladys he once knew slowly came back to him. This made for a beautiful February for us all, and each Valentine's Day, we can't help but smile at that now. In March of 2020, as Mom grew weaker and weaker, Dad knew he had to let Mom go. And on one of Mom's final nights on Earth, Mom called out to us. Both Dad and I went to her side, and Dad held Mom's right hand. Being left-handed, Mom began to spell George aloud and wrote it in the air. She asked me to help her write it in cursive. Oh, don't we love that as teachers? She then did the same for all 5 daughters, as if to be writing thank you cards to each of us. Dad reassured Mom that he would be there for their daughters. And even though Dad could have moved home 2 months prior, he would not leave that care center until he could walk through the doors with Mom and take her home, just as he promised her each time they passed those front doors on the way to the lunchroom for meals. But this time, as the funeral home attendee respectfully proceeded down the hallway of the care center with Mom, Dad bravely walked beside her as they crossed that threshold together. And once at the door, Dad told Mom he promised to take her home, and he couldn't think of a better home than heaven. Well, days after Mom passed, the world shut down due to national COVID mandates. COVID hit all of us so hard, but especially the elderly, who were robbed of their final years. Pam's daughter, Dr. Jaden Gracie, the one who painted the picture of our parents, is a radiation oncologist. She asks her terminally ill patients what their final wishes and their final months are, and then she contacts their family members to help bring those wishes to fruition. So many patients state they want to visit their previous home. Well, just days before the COVID mandates hit, we jumped in the car with Dad and took a ride down memory lane, where all the visuals cemented all the past stories he had shared through the years. Ironically, the timing to get Dad home was perfect. He escaped being at a center during a time when COVID-19 pandemic hit the residents of nearby centers. However, it was also horrible timing because Dad desperately needed to reunite with his friends. But instead, he was trapped in his house for the lockdown, unable to see others. Daily through phone calls, he heard about one friend after another losing his or her life to COVID, and nightmare messages about his friends at the care center only receiving visitors through the windows as loved ones sat outside. In the wake of Mom's death, Dad's only communication with the outside world was via telephone conversations with friends and relatives, as well as phone calls. Thank goodness for Zoom calls, letters, and food deliveries from us. When the threat of COVID finally subsided, Dad slowly made his way back into a world much changed due to the multitude of friends lost. Besides trips around town with us and long visits to the cemetery to spend time sharing stories about Mom, Dad ventured across the street to church each weekday to avoid the weekend crowd. I would like to read one of my favorite passages from our newest book that Pam got to experience with Dad at St. Mary's Catholic Church. On the first weekend Mass they attended, Pam and her dad took up his favorite spot in the back church pew. They soon heard a resounding, "George, George," coming from behind as Dr. Don caught a glimpse of his long-lost friend. Dad's expression was priceless as Pam's thoughts dashed back to our young years and getting the look if we made the slightest peep in church. But Pam soon discovered that when you are in your 90s and you have been robbed of precious time, it is acceptable to call out to your buddy during a church service. In the winter of 2022, Dad noticed a decline in his energy level, and he requested going back to the confines of a care center to regain his strength. While in the center, he fractured his hip. He took on this physical therapy as a personal challenge he would conquer. Well, in April of 2022, Pam traveled from Memphis to surprise Dad and to plan an author visit with me to be held at the Spirit Lake Library. Dad asked us to include a tribute to honor Mom for her 5 decades as a substitute teacher. So our Spirit Lake Library presentation, sharing the publishing of our first book at that time, as well as honoring both Mom and her sister Marian for their years of impact as youth on youth as educators, became Dad's homecoming celebration, reuniting him with so many people, as well as all of his daughters. He had worked tremendously hard all winter, building up his strength for this very special gathering. We spent the weekend cruising around Spirit Lake as we had so often, while he exclaimed to all his friends we met, he was leaving the care center and going home. Well, he chose the path around the lakes area that weekend, which was filled with narratives as we drove by many of his friends' homes. At the end of the weekend, with a big smile on his face, he shared that he had prayed to God that he would live long enough to honor Gladys one last time, and that Spirit Lake Library program did just that. So his life, he felt, was complete. A few days later, Dad gained his independence from that care center and returned home to 911 Gary Avenue. But it would be for only 4 days that Dad peacefully passed away, having shared with us sisters the greatest gift a father can give, to love our mother. This photo, taken by Rachel Tonslett, has a very special story connected to it that's revealed in our book. Our human narrative sessions not only filled the pages of another memoir, but also filled our lives with memories. Here's just a few. On Christmas Eve of 2023, each of our sisters, their husbands, and our nieces and nephews received a surprise package with our book documenting our many years of human library experiences to have and to hold. Human library, a place to go, sit, talk, and walk in the steps of others. Very few how-to guides exist to show us how to be good role models, spouses, parents, and children to our elderly parents. However, first-hand accounts help pave the way. It has been a pleasure sharing some of the human library narratives Pam and I gathered in co-authoring our 2 memoirs. In this photo, Pam likes to point out that she's much younger than me. But then I add, note who she's looking up to. May this theme of human libraries encourage each of you to record your own family narratives. We each have those places that will forever speak to our souls. And when we return, whisper, welcome home.